Hello, I'm the amazing... Oh my god, look at my hair. What the hell? Why is it sticking out like this? I'm the amazing atheist, and I hate my hair, but not quite as much as I hate what Christians call the cosmological argument. I've been seeing this one cropping up all over the place lately, and I'm just about sick of it. The cosmological argument, more like the illogical argument. It's a piece of crap. It goes a little something like this. Stuff exists. You know, like asteroids and stars and planets and Cheetos and Denzel Washington. It's all in existence. Stuff must have a cause. Denzel Washington didn't make himself, motherfucker. The universe is made of stuff that exists, and indeed it exists itself. Therefore, the universe had a cause. And guess what this cause was? That's right, it was God! It was God, it was God, it was God! Now maybe there's a Christian watching this video right now that says, "Hey, that's not the way the cosmological argument goes." Alright, fine. We'll scrap that version, and we'll use a version concocted by some Christians. So for all the whiny evangelicals out there, here is another version of the cosmological argument taken directly from the Christian Apologetics and Research Ministries website. Things exist. It is possible for those things not to exist. Whatever has the possibility of non-existence, yet exists, has been caused to exist. Something cannot bring itself into existence, since it must exist to bring itself into existence, which is illogical. There cannot be an infinite number of causes to bring something into existence. An infinite regression of causes ultimately has no initial cause, which means there is no cause of existence. Since the universe exists, it must have a cause. Therefore, there must be an uncaused cause of all things. The uncaused cause must be God. This argument is just plain stupid. Every time I hear it, I want to puke on my sneakers. The first proposition is that things exist. I guess that if you put too much stock in Rene Descartes, you might have a little bit of an issue with this one, but even then, not really. After all, even solipsists have to believe in themselves. I think, therefore I am doesn't really work if you subtract the therefore I am, so we'll leave this one alone. The first proposition is sound. The second proposition of the argument is that it's possible for that which exists to not exist. And this is where I have to say, how do you know? According to the law of the conservation of energy, energy and matter cannot be destroyed. They can only be changed. Energy can become matter, matter can become energy, energy can become a different kind of energy, matter can become a different kind of matter, but you can't destroy them. There is no known way to take matter or energy and revert them to a state of non-existence. Now, perhaps at some point in the future we will discover that you can in fact destroy matter or energy, but we don't know it now, so it's not exactly fair to state it as if it's a fact. Now, a lot of apologetics will bring up entropy at this point. They say that matter and energy couldn't have been around forever because that would violate the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy has nothing to do with the destruction of energy or matter. It only has to do with the deterioration of energy in a closed system. No energy is lost. Only the quality of energy is lost. And even if the law of entropy did say that matter and energy could be destroyed, and let me be absolutely clear once again that it does not, it still wouldn't matter. Because we don't know if the universe is a closed system or not. We don't know at this point. The third proposition is that whatever has the possibility of non-existence, yet exists, must have been caused. And once again, I have to ask, how did you come by this information? The Christian apologist Matt Slick justifies this premise like so.
A rock doesn't suddenly change from being a rock into, say, an axe head unless acted upon by something else. For matter and energy to change and form something new, they must be acted upon from the outside. So we must ask, what acted upon matter and energy and caused the universe to exist?
This statement is entirely misleading for a plethora of reasons. Just listen to how he words the last sentence. He says, and I quote, "What acted upon matter and energy and caused the universe to exist?" Acted upon matter and energy? No, Matt, that's not what you're trying to argue. You're not trying to argue that God acted upon matter and energy. You're trying to argue that he created matter and energy. That he said, "Let there be matter and energy." And lo, matter and energy did appear. Your argument would only make sense if you were to say that matter and energy always existed, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying that God snapped and it was. But let's set that aside for a moment and focus on the first part of your argument. The argument about the rock does not become an axe unless it's acted upon by an outside force. But this is an entirely different thing than God creating the universe, because no one is creating anything here. All we're doing is reconstituting existent matter into something new. We chisel away the rock until we are left with the form of an axe head. All of what was once part of this big rock is now in pebbles on the ground or in the axe head in your hand. All of the matter and energy that you used to create that axe head were already extant within the universe. So it's not like you brought them into being. The fact of the matter is, there is no precedent that says that that which exists must have been caused to exist. Because the making of the axe head is not an act of true creation in the divine sense. All of the materials and energy needed to create it were right there in the universe. They were just reconstituted to form the axe. The only way that you can say that the axe head just came into existence is on a purely conceptual level. And that doesn't really work for this argument, because we're not talking about the universe being actualized in a conceptual level. We're talking about it actually being physically made to exist from nothingness. This is what you claim to be the power of God. Now, the other argument that you make in favor of this proposition goes a little bit like so. It says that something cannot bring itself into existence since it must exist to bring itself into existence, which is illogical. Why does it have to bring itself into existence? Is that the only option? Either it made itself or God made it? Those are the only two possibilities? No, of course not. That's a false dichotomy. I can think of a number of other possibilities just offhand. It might have always existed in some form or another. It might have been created by a completely impersonal force, something that we don't yet understand. And it could be that it was created by some mechanism just completely beyond human understanding. This brings us to the fourth proposition, which is that there cannot be an infinite number of causes to bring something into existence. The rationale that we are provided goes a little bit like so. It says, an infinite regression of causes ultimately has no initial cause, which means there's no cause of existence. And since our universe exists, it must have a cause. This is why, of all the answers to the question of why does existence exist, God seems the least likely. Because you cannot posit God as the answer to the cause of the universe without getting stuck in that infinite regression of who created God, who created the person who created God, who created the person who created the person who created God, and so on and so forth. Oddly enough, Matt Slick makes this argument himself. He says this: you cannot have an infinite regression of causes. It's like having an infinite line of dominoes falling one after another. If you go back infinitely in time and try to find the first domino that started it all, you'd never find it because you'd have to cross an infinite amount of time to get to it, which is impossible to do. This would also mean that there you can't have an infinite regression of causes. Oddly, he says this as if it were an argument for God rather than against him. I guess his argument is that God must be real because the universe needs a cause, but God can't have a cause because that would lead to an infinite regression chain, which would lead back to infinity, and that wouldn't make any sense. This is just stupid, folks. It makes the presupposition that all things must have a cause. And that's the whole premise of the cosmological argument to begin with. So we have to accept the cosmological argument as part of the rationale for the cosmological argument? That doesn't make any sense, folks. That's just begging the question. It also just flat out ignores Occam's razor by positing an utterly superfluous God as a solution to a non-existent problem. It never addresses why God is exempt from needing a cause and the universe isn't. If God doesn't need a cause, then it seems to me that the universe shouldn't need a cause, and if the universe doesn't need a cause, then we don't need a God. It seems to me that Matt Slick's only rationalization for why God can't have a cause is just to shrug his shoulders and say, well, if he did have a cause, then that would make what I'm saying make no sense. The fifth proposition is this: there must be an uncaused cause of all things. So now let's ask the Christians a very simple question. Why can't the universe itself be the uncaused cause? Why is it at all prudent or necessary to say that God is the uncaused cause, which is Proposition 6? God is the uncaused cause, ladies and gentlemen. That is where this entire argument has been leading. And hell, let's go ahead and grant them Proposition 6. Let's go ahead and grant them that God is the uncaused cause. That's right, let's grant them the whole cosmological argument from start to finish. Let's say that every single proposition of this argument is completely sound. All it would mean is that the most rational default position for any human being would change from atheism to deism. That's right, folks, because this does nothing whatsoever to argue for the Christian God. It also does nothing whatsoever to argue for the Muslim God, or for any of the other gods that humanity has dreamed up in the dark and bloody annals of human history. So even if the cosmological argument held water, which it doesn't, it holds about as much water as a spaghetti strainer, it still wouldn't argue for any particular God. All it would argue for is the existence of some God whose nature would still be an absolute mystery to all of humanity. This argument does nothing to reveal the nature of God. All it does is establish that a deist God exists. Of course, it doesn't even do that because, as we have shown, every single proposition other than the first one is completely and utterly erroneous. So to recap, only the first proposition of the argument is sound. The 5 propositions that follow are just a bunch of fluff designed to reaffirm the faith of the already pious. In terms of actually presenting a cogent argument, it completely and utterly fails. So, in other words, the cosmological argument sucks.